Hi, I'm Susie Garden, and this is the Ageless and Awesome podcast. I'm an age-defying naturopath and clinical nutritionist, and I'm here to bust myths around women's health and aging so that you can be ageless and awesome in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The Ageless and Awesome podcast is dedicated to helping women through perimenopause and menopause with great health, a positive mindset, and outrageous confidence. Hit subscribe or follow now, and let's get started. Hello, gorgeous woman, and welcome to Q&A Thursday. Each week on Thursdays, I answer your questions. So before I get into today's question, if you're wanting me to address something, then please message me at Susie Garden Wellness, or you can, if you're listening on Spotify, you can message me directly through the app on this episode. Just have a look down towards the bottom of the show notes and you will see an ability to message me, which is super cool. Anyway, let's get to today's question. So I've been asked this by quite a few people. People have been asking me about something called food sequencing. Now, you may have heard about this. It's actually been around for quite some time. I think it's just being made popular by someone who's fairly big on social media. And I just wanted to get into this to talk about what the science says about this. So if you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, food sequencing is when you eat your foods in a certain order in order to manage your blood glucose. And this particular one that's been coming up a lot with clients is eating greens first, like salads first, and then proteins and then carbs last. And it's interesting because this is a technique that's been used for quite some time in terms of, when I say, food sequencing is a technique, but that type of food sequencing that I just mentioned, it's not really what the science supports. A different sequence is actually supported by science, and that is eating protein first and then the rest of what's on your plate. And this is because there's a few things. It slows down gastric emptying. So what's gastric emptying? Gastric refers to the stomach, the actual stomach, anatomically. And when you eat, you chew the food, it goes down your esophagus into the stomach first, gets broken down a bit, and then goes into your small intestine. So when we can slow gastric emptying, it means that the rate at which the food is going from the stomach into the small intestine is slowed down a little bit, and that really helps with digestion. If you're eating foods that are really processed or high in sugar, they actually get digested super quickly and can be dumped into your small intestine and really spike up your blood glucose, which triggers a big insulin release, and that can make you feel rubbish. I'm sure you've probably had this experience. It usually happens when you've had like a cake or an ice cream or something where you feel really good, you get that burst of energy and you're like, yeah, I feel great. And then you might feel nauseated, sweaty, weak, like having like a hypo. And this used to happen to me a lot when I didn't understand nutrition. And what we know about food sequencing, specifically when you're having your protein first, or a couple of bites of protein first, actually is all you need to do. You don't just need to eat your protein first and then your veggies or salads or whatever. You just have a couple of bites of protein first. And what this does is it does slow this gastric emptying, but it also has this extra advantage. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here. It actually stimulates a hormone called glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. And when protein from your food hits the cells in your intestines, so that's protein specifically, this hormone is secreted which slows that gastric emptying even further. And that hormone GLP-1 also affects the pancreas, where it helps secretion of insulin and that kind of mops up the glucose in your blood. And in fact, there is a drug. I used to work when I was in the pharmaceutical industry. I used to work with a drug that was actually a GLP-1 agonist. And that was a drug that was for people with diabetes. And it was actually worked really well to help manage blood glucose in people with diabetes, a GLP-1 agonist. So by having your food in a particular order, or at least having what I recommend to my clients when they work with me in the GLOW protocol or with metabolic balance, is that you have 2 bites of protein first, and then you go for your whatever else you want to eat, whatever else is on your plate, your veggies, your salads, your bread, whatever. So that is where the science is right now with food sequencing. And this has been the case for quite some time. And in fact, I believe in the diabetic eating guidelines, that's been the case for quite some time, is to have this eating protein first. So I hope that kind of answers that question. I'm sure, because I've had it so many times, particularly in the first few months of this year. I'm feeling like there must be something on social media that's driving it, because that's often what happens when people come into clinic and they all have the same kind of question. It's usually that. So yeah, it's funny. And when you kind of have this knowledge, and when I first learned this, I realized how often I go for the carbs first. And I don't know whether it's because, for me personally, I'm quite sensitive to carbs. I love carbs. But I know for myself, if I'm sitting down to a meal and there's bread, I will always, well, I used to, always have a bite of the bread or the toast or whatever first. And even though I've been, I guess, food sequencing, having a couple of bites of protein first for quite a number of years now, it's still my default that if I'm not really mindful about what I'm eating, if I sit down, if I'm talking to people or whatever, I will naturally just go for the bread or go for the veg rather than the protein first. So go figure. So yeah, this is something I do actually say also when I do my master classes. That is one of my key tips for weight loss, because with weight loss, we want to manage glucose. All right, so we want to manage glucose because we want to manage insulin. Insulin is your fat storage hormone, so we want to keep that nice and regulated. So one of my key tips that I tell people is have 2 bites of your protein first with any meal that you're having. So you can start that tip right now. So I hope that's been helpful. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you do have a question for me to answer, just let me know. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Ageless and Awesome podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure you click the little plus button if you're on Apple Podcasts, or the follow button if you're on Spotify, so that you can get each new episode delivered to you every single week. If you like free stuff, and who doesn't, then head over to susiegarden.com and grab my 8 essential age-defying secrets every woman over 40 should know right now. Or if you'd like to continue the discussion, head over to Instagram and DM me at Susie Garden Wellness. I'd love to connect with you.